It was a quiet night in suburban Kansas when the fire erupted without warning. Emily, who had stayed the night at her Aunt Rachel's, ran outside and froze in shock as she realized her house was engulfed in flames. "Emily, wait!" Rachel's voice rang out, her voice filled with panic. But Emily didn't stop. As she got closer, a weak, desperate cry reached her ears. It was Nathan, her younger brother. "Help! Me!" Emily's heart was pounding. Without thinking, she rushed toward the house, ignoring Rachel's desperate attempts to hold her back. "No, Emily, you can't!" Rachel screamed, but it was too late. Emily was already inside. The temperature was stifling. Walls and furniture collapsed as the fire consumed everything in sight. She coughed, covering her mouth as she staggered forward, calling Nathan's name. Her eyes stung, her vision blurred by tears and smoke. The air was thick and stifling, but she continued, driven by instinct and love for her brother. But the fire was relentless, spreading faster than she could move. She reached the living room when the ceiling groaned ominously. A deafening crack followed, and everything above her collapsed in a fiery cascade. Emily didn't even have time to scream. When the firefighters arrived, they found her unconscious beneath the rubble, her body covered in burns and ash. They carried her out, barely alive, as the house continued to crumble. The flames were eventually extinguished, but the damage was done. Her parents, grandmother, and Nathan were all gone. The fire had taken everything. Emily woke up in a hospital room days later, her body aching and her face bandaged. The memories came crashing down on her like a storm, and the weight of the loss was unbearable. Rachel sat by Emily's bedside, her voice shaking as she held her niece's hand. "Emily, honey," she said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're the only one who survived." Emily was numb, too broken to accept the truth. Her mind wandered back to the family she had lost. Her parents had been hard-working and kind, always putting their children first. Her father had taught her to fish in the creek behind their house, patiently showing her how to tie a line and wait for a pull. Her mother had baked the best pies in town, filling the house with the warm scent of cinnamon and apples. Nathan, her younger brother, was the center of their mother's attention. Mischievous but sweet, he would follow Emily everywhere, calling her name with his childlike smile. And their grandmother. Emily could almost hear her gentle voice, telling stories by the fire, weaving magic into every word. But even in the warmth of that love, Emily often felt like an outsider. Her mother's attention always seemed to be on Nathan, leaving Emily yearning for a connection she couldn't quite grasp. But she found comfort in her Aunt Rachel, her mother's older sister. Rachel lived a few miles away and never married, dedicating her life to work and family. "Emily, you're always welcome here," Rachel would say, her voice warm and steady. She often invited Emily to spend weekends at her house, showering her with small gifts and endless affection. Unlike her mother, Rachel made Emily feel seen, cherished. On the night of the fire, Emily had been at Rachel's house. She had fallen asleep after dinner, dreaming of her grandmother's stories and Nathan's laughter. That night, Rachel had insisted she stay over instead of heading back home. "It's late and it's cold. Stay here tonight," Rachel had said, smiling. Emily never imagined it would be the last time she'd see her family alive. Rachel picked Emily up from the hospital after weeks of treatment. The first thing she did was wrap her arms around the girl, whispering, "You're safe now. We'll figure this out together." At Rachel's modest home, Emily struggled to adjust. Her face, now marred with scars, drew stares from curious neighbors. Rachel tried to shield her. She cooked pancakes, Emily's childhood favorite, and coaxed her to eat. But Emily barely touched the food. Walking into town was like stepping into a spotlight. People whispered, exchanged glances, and sometimes outright stared. "Did you see her?" a woman murmured to a friend at the grocery store. Emily heard every word, but clenched her jaw, holding back tears. Rachel noticed. "Ignore them," she said later, rubbing Emily's hand gently. "They don't know what you've been through." But it was easier said than done. Rachel worked tirelessly to find solutions for Emily's scars. She called every clinic she could think of, from nearby hospitals to specialists out of state. One day, she hung up the phone, sighing deeply. "They want $20,000 up front," she muttered to herself, thinking Emily couldn't hear. She spent nights going over her budget, cutting back on groceries, skipping her usual visits to the salon, and setting aside every spare penny. Emily eventually caught on. "You don't have to do this," Emily said softly one evening. Emily tried to reassure Rachel not to worry about her, insisting she would be fine and urging her aunt not to waste her savings. But Rachel, with tears welling in her eyes, refused to let such words pass. "Emily," she said firmly, "you are not a waste, and I will never stop fighting for you." Emily shook her head, her voice soft. "But I see what it's costing you, and I can't let you give up everything for me." After dinner, Rachel would often sit with Emily on the worn-out couch, recounting stories of her youth. She would describe how, as a quiet and underestimated girl, she had surprised everyone by growing into someone strong enough to raise a fighter like Emily. These stories, filled with humor and life lessons, gave Emily new perspective and hope. One evening, Rachel placed a hand on Emily's shoulder and gently told her that life doesn't stop when things get tough. It demands that one finds a way forward. Emily absorbed those words deeply. A week later, she shared her decision with Rachel, expressing a desire to become a nurse. "If I can't fix myself," Emily said with determination, "maybe I can help someone else." Rachel's face lit up with pride as she encouraged Emily, calling her girl. Nursing school proved challenging, especially when classmates ridiculed Emily for her scars. Cruel whispers followed her in the cafeteria, comparing her to a horror movie character. But Emily stayed focused, determined not to let their words derail her goals. At home, Rachel was her safe haven. She always seemed to know when Emily had endured a rough day, pulling her into a comforting hug and reminding her, "Those kids don't matter. What you're doing is incredible." Gradually, Emily's dedication began to overshadow her insecurities. By her second semester, classmates started to view her in a new light. Her sharp answers and unmatched work ethic stood out. When her peers struggled in lab sessions, Emily was the one who stepped in to help, proving her strength and competence to everyone, including herself. "She knows her stuff," one student admitted. Respect replaced mockery, though scars still framed her face. Through it all, Rachel remained Emily's anchor. Rachel's sacrifices and unwavering belief in Emily became the foundation for everything Emily accomplished. While the scars on her face remained, the emotional wounds began to heal. Rachel's love and guidance proved to be more powerful than any surgery could ever be. Emily had just started to adjust to her new life at school when Lucas showed up. He walked into the classroom like he owned the place, wearing a leather jacket and carrying the kind of confidence that came from a privileged upbringing. Everyone noticed him instantly. He wasn't just good-looking, he radiated charm and mystery. Whispers spread like wildfire. "He's from the city," someone said. "Got into some kind of trouble, so they sent him here," another added. Lucas didn't seem to care. He smiled easily, joked with classmates, and quickly became the center of attention. For Emily, Lucas was just another face in the crowd. She had bigger concerns than some new kid, but fate had other plans. During a group project in history class, the teacher paired Emily and Lucas together. Emily froze. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, especially not with someone like him. Lucas barely looked at her at first, but as they worked together, He started to notice her sharp mind and quiet determination. "Wow, you're actually pretty smart," he said one afternoon, smirking. Emily ignored him. She knew better than to trust flattery from someone like Lucas. Still, she couldn't deny he was different. He had a serious side, one that came out when he talked about their project. Yet, just as she started to see another layer to him, Lucas couldn't help but tease. "Do you ever smile? Or is that against the rules for you?" he joked one day, laughing as he leaned back in his chair. Emily clenched her fists, but said nothing. She was used to being mocked, but coming from Lucas, it stung. Everything changed one afternoon during gym class. Lucas was goofing off with a group of boys, tossing a basketball back and forth, when he suddenly turned his attention to Emily. She was sitting on the bleachers, her face partially hidden by a scarf she always wore. "Hey, Emily, why don't you join us?" Lucas called out, grinning. She shook her head, trying to ignore him, but Lucas wasn't done. He jogged over, still smiling. "Come on, don't be shy," he said, reaching for her scarf in a playful gesture. Before she could react, Lucas pulled the scarf down. The moment froze. The gym fell silent as everyone stared at Emily's face, the scars stark against her pale skin. Lucas's smile vanished. "Oh, I didn't," he stammered, but the damage was done. Emily bolted from the gym, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, the whispers started again, sharper and crueler than ever. That night, Emily locked herself in her room. She couldn't stop replaying the moment in her head, the look of shock on Lucas's face, the gasps from her classmates. She had been humiliated before, but this was different. This felt like a betrayal. The next morning, Emily made her decision. She couldn't face Lucas or anyone else at school. She wrote a brief note to her teacher, explaining that she needed time off. Rachel, her aunt, didn't push for answers when she saw Emily's tear-streaked face. Instead, she simply hugged her and said, "Take all the time you need." Meanwhile, Lucas couldn't shake the guilt. He hadn't meant to hurt Emily, but his careless actions had consequences he couldn't ignore. As the days passed, he noticed her absence and felt a gnawing regret. For the first time, Lucas realized that not everything could be fixed with a smile or an apology. Emily returned to the small town with a heavy heart and a clear goal: rebuild her life. Taking a job as a nurse at the local health clinic seemed like a good start. The work wasn't easy. The clinic was underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed by the needs of the community. Patients doubted her at first, questioning her abilities and experience. But Emily stayed focused. With every patient she treated and every hour she spent at the clinic, she proved her worth. Slowly, the townsfolk began to trust her. Even then, loneliness hung over her. She missed the days when she had friends, laughter, and dreams of a normal life. The challenges at the clinic didn't stop at earning trust. Emily quickly realized just how inadequate the clinic's resources were. Supplies ran out too quickly, medical equipment was outdated, and there weren't enough staff to handle emergencies. She refused to accept the status quo. Each night after her shift, she stayed late, poring over books and online resources. She sketched out plans for improvement, from new equipment to better protocols. It became her mission to make the clinic a place where no one would be turned away or left untreated. The work gave her purpose, though it also reminded her of what she'd lost. One evening, Emily finished a late shift and headed home under the dim glow of streetlights. The town was quiet, the streets nearly empty. That's when she saw him. An old man lay by the roadside, groaning in pain, his body weak and trembling. People walked by, some glancing his way, but none stopping to help. Emily immediately rushed to his side. Her training kicked in. She crouched beside the old man, checking his vitals and stabilizing him with what little she had in her bag. Realizing he couldn't stay on the cold ground much longer, Emily carefully helped him to her car and drove him to her small house. That night, she stayed by his side, tending to his wounds and ensuring he was comfortable. By morning, the man was awake and grateful. His name was Mr. Kane, and as they talked, Emily realized he wasn't just any elderly man. He was a retired businessman, well known in certain circles. His sharp mind and calm demeanor hinted at a life of experience and wealth. He noticed how Emily kept her face partly hidden behind a mask, even as she worked tirelessly to care for him. When he asked her about it, Emily hesitated, but eventually shared her story. She spoke of the fire, the scars, and the shame that made her avoid mirrors and hide her face. Mr. Kane listened without judgment. "You've been through more than most people could handle," he said. "But you're still here. That says a lot about your strength." He didn't press her further, but made a mental note. That same day, as Emily ran errands for supplies, Mr. Kane discreetly contacted his assistant. He had a plan. The next morning, Mr. Kane was gone. Emily wasn't surprised. Patients often left without much notice. But later that afternoon, he returned, and this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He placed a large envelope and a card on Emily's kitchen table. "You deserve more than what life has handed you," he said simply. Inside the envelope was a check for a significant amount of money, more than enough to cover the costs of a top-tier facial reconstruction surgery. The card contained the name and number of a renowned plastic surgeon who was notoriously difficult to book, but had already agreed to take on Emily as a patient. Emily stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what this gesture meant. Mr. Kane placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got a good heart, Emily. That's rare. Let this be a fresh start." That night, Emily sat alone, clutching the envelope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond the scars, a life where she could face the world without fear. Emily packed her belongings and stepped onto the bus bound for the city, her heart heavy yet filled with a flicker of hope. The city hospital, with its gleaming glass facade and bustling corridors, was a world apart from the small-town clinic she was used to. The efficiency and precision of the staff overwhelmed her, but she had no time to dwell on it. Within hours of her arrival, the hospital began running a battery of tests. For an entire week, Emily was poked, prodded, and questioned by teams of surgeons and nurses, all working to prepare her for the operation that would change her life. Though fear gripped her at times, she held on to the encouragement she had received from her community. Their words echoed in her mind. "You deserve this chance." The day of the surgery arrived. As Emily was wheeled into the operating room, her palms sweat and her breathing quickened. She forced herself to recall the faces of the townspeople who had supported her, the elderly farmer who had gifted her his life savings, and the neighbors who had come together to make her dream a reality. Beside her, Aunt Rachel offered comforting words, holding her hand until the last possible moment before the medical staff took over. Hours later, she awoke groggy and disoriented, but alive. The operation was a success. Recovery was grueling. For a month, Emily lived in the hospital's rehabilitation wing, her face bandaged and her movements restricted. Aunt Rachel stayed by her side throughout, ensuring Emily never felt alone. She brought homemade meals, read aloud letters from the townsfolk, and filled the room with warmth and encouragement. The nurses checked on her regularly, offering gentle words of support. The first time Emily saw herself in the mirror after the bandages were removed, she was speechless. The scars that had once defined her were gone, replaced by smooth skin and delicate features. It wasn't just her reflection that had changed. For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of her insecurities begin to lift. When Emily returned to the town, she was greeted with open arms. Her colleagues at the clinic clapped and cheered as she walked in, their admiration clear. "Welcome back, Emily," her supervisor said warmly, handing her a bouquet of daisies. Though their kindness touched her, Emily remained guarded. She politely thanked them, but maintained the emotional walls she had built over the years. At home, she kept to herself, unwilling to let anyone too close. Her small house became her sanctuary, where she could process the changes in her own time. Weeks passed, and life returned to a steady rhythm. Emily threw herself into her work, gaining respect for her dedication and professionalism. Then, one morning, the clinic director announced a new addition to their team. "We've hired a new doctor," he said at the staff meeting. "He'll be joining us starting today." Emily barely listened as she sorted through patient files. The door opened, and in walked Lucas. His confident stride and familiar smile stopped Emily cold. She felt the blood drain from her face. It was him, the boy from her past, the one who had unwittingly caused her so much pain. Emily stiffened, her gaze fixed on the floor as the introductions were made. Lucas, now a man, seemed different. His voice was steady, but carried a note of humility as he greeted the team. "I'm looking forward to working with all of you," he said. Emily said nothing, keeping her composure as she focused on her work. As the meeting ended, Lucas caught her eye for a brief moment. There was a flicker of recognition, and his smile faltered. But Emily quickly turned away, gathering her things and leaving the room. She couldn't allow herself to relive the past, not now when she was just beginning to rebuild. The past had a way of resurfacing, but Emily was determined to keep it buried. Lucas arrived at the clinic on a crisp Monday morning. His demeanor was calm, professional, and confident. He greeted everyone warmly, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. The staff welcomed him with open arms, glad to have another skilled doctor on the team. Emily, however, kept her distance. She offered a curt nod and quickly returned to her paperwork. Her disinterest in him was clear, and Lucas couldn't help but notice. As the day progressed, he overheard colleagues mentioning Emily's recent reconstructive surgery, a result of a tragic accident. They spoke of her resilience, but hinted at her struggles to fully recover emotionally. By the end of his first day, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that Emily seemed familiar. Her name lingered in his mind. Memories of someone he once knew, someone he'd hurt, crept into his thoughts. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. That evening, curiosity got the better of him. He stayed late at the clinic, pulling Emily's personnel file. The moment he read through her history, it hit him like a freight train. Emily was the same girl he'd once embarrassed in front of their classmates. The scars on her face may have faded, but the memory of her humiliation had clearly not. The following morning, Lucas couldn't help but watch her as she moved efficiently through her rounds. Her polished appearance and calm demeanor didn't mask the icy barrier she kept firmly in place. When their eyes met, hers held no recognition, or perhaps none she was willing to show. He decided to test the waters. During a coffee break, he approached her. "Emily," he began, keeping his tone neutral. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" She looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. "I'm busy," she said flatly, shutting down the conversation before it could start. Her body language screamed discomfort. Lucas knew he'd have to tread carefully. Days passed, and Lucas couldn't shake the guilt. Memories of their school years surfaced, his careless jokes, the teasing. He had never meant to hurt her, but intent didn't erase impact. One afternoon, he caught her in the hallway. "Emily, I need to say something," he started, blocking her path. She paused, clearly irritated. "I was awful back then. I was immature, and I didn't think about how my actions affected you. I'm sorry." Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "That was a long time ago," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "I've moved on." Her eyes, however, betrayed her words. The pain wasn't gone, just buried. That night, fate forced their paths to cross again. a patient was rushed into the clinic, bleeding heavily from a deep gash. Both Emily and Lucas were the only staff on call. They immediately snapped into action, setting aside whatever personal history lingered between them. Lucas took charge, giving clear, concise instructions, while Emily worked methodically beside him. They moved like a well-oiled machine, their combined efforts saving the patient in record time. When it was all over, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe. She glanced at Lucas, noticing his unwavering focus and quiet determination. He was different now, more composed, more human. As they cleaned up the emergency room, Lucas finally broke the silence. "You were incredible in there," he said sincerely. Emily didn't respond right away. Instead, she wiped down the counter, her back to him. "We did what we had to do," she replied curtly, though her tone lacked the harshness of their earlier exchanges. For the first time, Emily felt a flicker of something other than resentment toward Lucas. Maybe it was respect, or perhaps curiosity about who he had become. Lucas didn't push further. He knew he'd made progress, however small. For now, that was enough. Lucas was relentless in his efforts to help Emily. He knew her trust wasn't easy to earn, but he showed up every day, ready to take on whatever the small-town clinic threw at them. Whether it was assisting her with difficult cases, managing supplies, or dealing with complaints from the town's residents, he was there. He stayed calm, patient, and consistent. His actions spoke louder than words. Emily, though guarded, couldn't ignore his persistence. Slowly, she began to notice something different in him, a sincerity that wasn't there before. It was hard to keep up her walls, but she wasn't ready to let them fall just yet. One day, the peace shattered. A middle-aged woman stormed into the clinic, accusing Lucas of prescribing her the wrong medication. Her voice echoed through the small space as she demanded he be fired. Word spread fast in the tight-knit community, and whispers of doubt started circulating. Lucas kept his composure, but Emily could see the weight of the situation pressing on him. Emily wasn't one to jump to conclusions. She knew how quickly rumors could spiral in their town. She decided to investigate. Lucas handed over the patient's file without hesitation, his jaw tight, but his hands steady. Emily sat down with the records, combing through every detail. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The medication listed was correct, and the dosage matched the woman's needs. But something felt off. It wasn't until Emily spoke with the woman that the truth came to light. The patient sheepishly admitted she'd taken an additional medication given to her by a neighbor. It wasn't part of Lucas's prescription at all. Emily knew she had to act quickly. She called for a meeting at the clinic to clear the air. Standing before a small crowd of townspeople, Emily addressed the situation. "The issue wasn't Lucas's prescription," she said firmly, her eyes meeting the patient's. "It was an unfortunate mistake involving unapproved medication." She didn't accuse the woman outright, but gently guided her to admit the truth. The patient eventually stepped forward, apologizing for her error and retracting her accusations. Relief washed over the room, but none more so than on Lucas's face. The crowd murmured their approval, and the tension dissipated. For Lucas, it was a turning point. He realized Emily wasn't just an exceptional nurse. She was someone who fought for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Later, as the clinic quieted down, he approached her. "Thanks," he said simply. She looked up from her paperwork, nodding. "You didn't have to do that." Emily shrugged, but her tone was soft. "I know what it's like to be misunderstood." That night, as they locked up the clinic, Lucas hesitated at the door. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken words. "Emily," he started, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been carrying this around for a while. Seeing you again, working with you, it's not just about the job for me." She turned, her expression unreadable. Lucas took a deep breath. "I know I've hurt you before. I was a different person then, and I know I can't change the past. But I want a chance to prove I'm better now, to prove I care about you, not just because of what happened before, but because of who you are." Emily's eyes softened for a moment, but her walls were still firmly in place. "Lucas, this isn't something I can decide right now. I need time." Her voice wasn't cold, but it was steady. "I understand," Lucas said. He didn't press further. He just nodded and walked her to her car, giving her the space she asked for. The days that followed were quieter, but something between them had shifted. The trust they were rebuilding wasn't complete, but it was no longer out of reach. Emily and Lucas had become the heart of the clinic. Each day, they tackled the challenges of a small-town medical practice together. The way they communicated without words, handing each other tools or finishing each other's tasks, amazed everyone around them. It didn't take long for the townsfolk to start noticing the chemistry. "You two are like a married couple," one patient teased as Lucas passed Emily a clipboard before she even asked for it. Emily laughed it off, shaking her head, but inside, her feelings were far less dismissive. She couldn't deny that the time they spent together was starting to mean something. It wasn't just about work anymore. She found herself thinking about Lucas when they weren't together, wondering what he might be doing or if he ever thought about her the same way. Despite her growing feelings, Emily tried to focus on her work. The town relied on her and Lucas, especially since they'd introduced new systems to make care more efficient. But no amount of efficiency could prepare them for what happened next. The rains had been falling for days, heavy and relentless. At first, people shrugged it off as a typical spring storm. But by the third day, the river began to swell. The town's emergency alarms blared just as Emily and Lucas finished their shift. They ran outside and saw the streets turning into rivers, the water rising faster than anyone had expected. Families were stranded in their homes, calling for help. Emily and Lucas didn't hesitate. They grabbed their emergency kits and waded into the chaos. It was a scene of panic and desperation. People clung to rooftops, livestock floated down the streets, and debris made every step a hazard. Lucas spotted a family trapped on a roof, the water lapping at their feet. A young boy clung to his mother, his terrified cries cutting through the roar of the flood. Without thinking, Lucas dove into the current. The water was icy and vicious, pulling at him with every step. He reached the family and lifted the boy into his arms. "I've got you," he told the child, his voice steady despite the danger. But as Lucas turned to head back, the water surged. He lost his footing and was swept under, the boy still in his arms. Emily, who had been helping another family nearby, saw him go under. Her blood ran cold. "Lucas!" she screamed, dropping everything to run toward the water. She dove in without hesitation. The cold shocked her system, but she pushed forward, her eyes scanning the murky water for any sign of him. Then she saw it, a flash of his shirt, barely visible above the surface. She reached him just as his grip on the boy faltered. "Hold on!" Emily shouted, grabbing Lucas with one arm and the boy with the other. Together, they fought the current, inching toward a large piece of debris that served as a makeshift raft. With one final push, they collapsed onto the raft, gasping for air. Lucas coughed violently, his strength nearly spent, but he gave Emily a weak thumbs up. They had made it. By the time the floodwaters receded, the town was unrecognizable. Streets were filled with mud and debris, homes destroyed. But thanks to Emily and Lucas, dozens of people had been rescued. The townsfolk hailed them as heroes, but Emily couldn't shake the image of Lucas nearly losing his life. That moment had shown her just how much he meant to her. Later that evening, the town gathered in the church to organize relief efforts. Emily sat on the steps outside, her hands trembling as she tried to process the day. She barely noticed Lucas approaching until he sat down beside her. "You're quiet," he said, his voice soft. Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It was a lot," she admitted. Lucas turned to face her. "Emily, there's something I need to say." His tone was serious, and she felt her stomach tighten. "I've been holding this in for a while, but I can't anymore. I don't just admire you for surviving what you went through. I admire you for who you are. Your strength, your compassion, your determination. You inspire me every day." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected Lucas felt something for her, but hearing him say it out loud was overwhelming. "Lucas," she began, but her words faltered. She wanted to say so much, but couldn't find the right way to express it. "I'm not expecting an answer right now," Lucas said quickly. "I just needed you to know how I feel." Emily nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Emily went home and pulled out an old notebook she hadn't touched in years. She flipped through its worn pages, her mind swirling with emotions. Finally, she began to write. At first, the words came slowly. She wrote about the fire that had changed her life, about the pain of losing her family, and the struggle to rebuild herself. Then, she wrote about Rachel, the aunt who had been her rock through everything, but most of all, she wrote about Lucas. She wrote about how his presence had once been a source of pain, a reminder of the insecurities she tried so hard to hide. But over time, that had changed. Lucas had become someone she could trust, someone who saw her for who she truly was. As the words filled the pages, Emily felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. Lucas wasn't just a reminder of her past. He was a symbol of her future, one filled with hope and possibilities. The next morning, Emily closed the notebook and placed it on her bedside table. She wasn't ready to give Lucas an answer yet, but for the first time, she knew what that answer would be. Hope was a powerful thing, and Lucas had given it back to her. Emily had spent weeks grappling with her emotions. Every time Lucas reached out, she felt the weight of their shared past, the mistakes and the pain they'd caused each other. Yet, she couldn't deny the undeniable pull she felt toward him. One evening after a long shift at the clinic, Lucas showed up unexpectedly at her door. His eyes were earnest, his voice steady but soft. "Emily, I'm not perfect, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be better for you." For the first time, she let herself believe him. That night, as they sat in the dim light of her living room, she admitted it. "I still care about you, Lucas. I'm tired of holding on to the past. Let's start fresh." Lucas's face lit up, his joy unmistakable. He promised, right there and then, "I'll never let you down again." Their reconciliation marked the beginning of a new chapter. With Emily's expertise as a nurse and Lucas's determination to make amends, they became a force for good in their small town. They spearheaded initiatives to improve healthcare access, setting up free clinics for the elderly and underserved. Emily's compassion paired seamlessly with Lucas's organizational skills. Together, they transformed lives, earning the admiration of everyone around them. The townsfolk began to notice. Emily and Lucas became symbols of hope, of redemption, and of the power of second chances. Whispers of their efforts spread beyond the town, drawing attention from neighboring communities. Donations and volunteers began pouring in. What started as small projects turned into a movement, uniting the town in a shared mission to uplift one another. Months passed. Life fell into a comforting rhythm. Then, on a warm autumn afternoon, Lucas invited Emily for a walk near the river. The golden leaves crunched beneath their feet as they approached an old oak tree. This tree held meaning, a place where Emily had found solace during the flood that had nearly taken everything from her. Lucas turned to her, his expression serious but full of love. "Emily," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring, one that had belonged to his late mother. "This ring means everything to me, but not as much as you do. You've shown me the strength of forgiveness and the beauty of resilience. Will you marry me?" Emily felt her breath catch. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally managed to say, "Yes," her voice was steady, filled with conviction. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in years, she felt a peace she thought she'd never find again. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with anticipation and joy. Emily and Lucas agreed on a simple ceremony, one that reflected their journey together. On a crisp spring morning, under the very tree where Lucas had proposed, they exchanged vows. Friends, family, and townsfolk gathered, their smiles genuine, their support heartfelt. It was an intimate celebration, but the love in the air was palpable. Emily looked radiant in a simple white dress, her face glowing with happiness. Lucas stood beside her, his eyes never leaving hers. As they said, "I do," the crowd erupted in applause, showering them with flower petals and blessings. It was a moment of pure joy, one that felt like the culmination of every hardship they'd overcome. And that's the story of Emily and Lucas, a journey of loss, resilience, love, and hope. It's a powerful reminder that even after the darkest storms, the sun can shine again, and second chances can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where life felt impossible, but you found the strength to rebuild? Maybe it was a loss, a challenge, or a new beginning that changed your life. Share your story in the comments below. Remember, your story could inspire someone else to keep going, just like Emily's journey might resonate with so many out there. If this video touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong, stay hopeful. Their story didn't end there. Emily and Lucas continued to dedicate their lives to the town, using their love as a foundation for everything they built. Together, they proved that even after the darkest times, there's a way to rebuild, not just a life, but a future filled with hope and love.